Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you to Gautama Prabhu and Jagannath Gopal Prabhu for the opportunity to speak. Yes, so before we actually start reading, we can do like a very short recap, and then we'll have our regular reading, and then we can go from there. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so you all can see my screen, right? Okay.
Yes, Vrinda. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yep. So where are we right now? Just quickly. So the idea is, so Maitreya Muni, he's actually describing to Vidura the dynasty of King Uttanapada, and that's how we hear the stories of Dhruva and so on and so forth. And from Dhruva, and how did we reach King Prācīnabarhi? It's that Dhruva's younger son was Vatsara, then after some generation was Anga, then Vena, then Prithu, who was born from the arms, I think arms, and Archie, who was his wife, and then so on and so forth. We finally reached the Prachetas, who were the 10 sons of Prācīnabarhi. And the Prachetas they went to do austerities before going into Grahasthashram, and there they got Lord Shiva, and who gave them the Rudra Gita. And we just go through all the stories, and finally where we are is that Narad Muni, he visits King Prācīnabarhi, and he sees that how he is so much involved in all these fruitive activities, and especially in those activities he's doing all these animal sacrifices, and from there he starts his allegorical stories and whatnot. And that very nicely, Nupur, in the last class, she summarized everything and explained all the different connections and analogies. So we're just going to start from there. Now we are on verse 53, and we're going to complete it. So we can have 3 readers. Anyone, if you would like to read, please let me know. Can't see the hands.
Can you zoom in, Vrinda? I can. Oh, so Nupur can go first. I can go second.
Is this good enough?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yes, we can start, please.
Krishna. My dear king, please search out that deer who is engaged in eating grass in a very nice flower garden along with his wife. That deer is very much attached to his business, and he's enjoying the sweet singing of the bumblebees in his garden. Just try to understand his position. He is unaware that before him is a tiger, which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh. Behind the deer is a hunter who is threatening to pierce him with sharp arrows. Thus, the deer's death is imminent. My dear king, woman, who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end very disturbing, is exactly like the flower, which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With woman, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires, and he enjoys sex, just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He enjoys a life of sense gratification, from his tongue to his genitals. And in this way, the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death who is trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. I just want to confirm, Gopi Didi, how many verses I have to read? Sorry.
You can read till 65, please.
Okay. Thank you. My dear king, just try to understand the allegorical position of the deer. Be fully conscious of yourself and give up the pleasure of hearing about promotion to heavenly planets by fruitive activity. Give up household life, which is full of sex, as well as stories about such things, and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. through the mercy of the liberated souls. In this way, please give up your attraction for material existence. The king replied, My dear Brahmana, whatever you have said, I have heard with great attention, and considering all of it, have come to the conclusion that the acharyas, teachers, who engaged me in fruitive activity did not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me? My dear Brahmana, there are contradictions between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers who engaged me in fruitive activities. I now can understand the distinction between devotional service, knowledge, and renunciation. I had some I had some doubts about them, but you have now very kindly dissipated all these doubts. I can now understand how even the great sages are bewildered by the real purpose of life. Of course, there is no question of sense gratification. The results of whatever living entity does in this life are enjoyed in the next life. The expert knowers of the Vedic conclusions say that one enjoys or suffers the results of his past activities. But practically, it is seen that the body that performed the work in the last birth is already lost. So, how is it possible to enjoy or suffer the reactions of that work in a different body? The great sage Narada continued, the living entity acts in a gross body in this life. This body is forced to act by the subtle body composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. After the gross body is lost, the subtle body is still there to enjoy or suffer. Thus, there is no change. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a dog or either as a god or a dog. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or a demigod's body on this planet or on another planet. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. The living entity labors under the bodily conception of I am this, I am that, my duty is this, and therefore I shall do it. These are mental impressions, and all these activities are temporary. Nonetheless, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity gets a chance to execute all his mental concoctions. Thus, he gets another body. One can understand the mental or conscious position of a living entity by the activities of two kinds of senses, the knowledge acquiring senses and the executive senses. Similarly, by the mental condition or consciousness of a person, one can understand his position in the previous life. Sometimes we suddenly experience something that was never experienced in the present body by sight or hearing. Sometimes we see such things suddenly in dreams. Therefore, my dear king, the living entity, who has a subtle mental covering, develops all kinds of thoughts and images because of his previous body. Take this from me as certain. There is no possibility of concocting anything mentally without having perceived it in the previous body. Hare Krishna.
O king, all good fortune unto you. The mind is the cause of the living entities attaining a certain type of body in accordance with its association with material nature. According to one's mental composition, one can understand what the living entity was in his previous life, as well as what kind of body he will have in the future. Thus, the mind indicates the past and future bodies. Sometimes in a dream, we see something never experienced or heard of in this life. But all these incidents have been experienced at different times, in different places, and in different conditions. The mind of the living entity continues to exist in various gross bodies, and according to one's desire for sense gratification, the mind records different thoughts. In the mind, these appear together in different combinations. Therefore, these images sometimes appear as things never seen or never heard before. Krishna consciousness means constantly associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in such a mental state that the devotee can observe the cosmic manifestation exactly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does. Such observation is not always possible, but it becomes manifest exactly like the dark planet known as Rahu, which is observed in the presence of the full moon. As long as there exists the subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identification and its relative objective, the gross body, exist as well. When the living entity is in deep sleep, when he faints, when there is some great shock on account of severe loss at the time of death, or when the body temperature is very high, the movement of the life air is arrested. At that time, the living entity loses knowledge of identifying the body with the self. When one is a youth, all the 10 senses and the mind are completely visible. However, in the mother's womb or in the boyhood state, the sense organs and the mind remain covered, just as the full moon is covered by the darkness of the dark moon night. When the living entity dreams, the sense objects are not actually present. However, because one has associated with the sense objects, they become manifest. Similarly, the living entity with underdeveloped senses does not cease to exist materially, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. Till which verse I should read, Vrinda?
Till 75, sir.
Okay. The 5 sense objects, the 5 sense organs, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and the mind are the 16 material expansions. These combine with the living entity and are influenced by the 3 modes of material nature. Thus, the existence of the conditioned soul is understood. By virtue of the processes of the subtle body, the living entity develops and gives up gross bodies. This is known as the transmigration of the soul. Thus, the soul becomes subjected to different types of so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. Hare Krishna.
By virtue of the process, the caterpillar transports itself from one leaf to another by capturing one leaf before giving up the other. Similarly, according to his previous work, the living entity must capture another body before giving up the one he has. This is because the mind is the reservoir of all kinds of desires. As long as we desire to enjoy sense gratification, we create material activities. When the living entity acts in the material field, he enjoys the senses, and while enjoying the senses, he creates another series of material activities. In this way, the living entity becomes entrapped as a conditioned soul. We should always know that this cosmic manifestation is created, maintained, and annihilated by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, everything within this cosmic manifestation is under the control of the Lord. To be enlightened by this perfect knowledge, one should always engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. The great sage Maitreya continued, the supreme devotee, the great saint Nārada, thus explained to King Prācīnabarhi the constitutional position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. After giving an invitation to the king, Nārada Muni left to return to Siddhaloka. In the presence of his ministers, the saintly King Prācīnabarhi left orders for his sons to protect the citizens. He then left home and went off to undergo austerities in a holy place known as Kapilashrama. Having undergone austerities and penances at Kapilashrama, King Prācīnabarhi attained full liberation from all material designations. He constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and attained a spiritual position qualitatively equal to that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Vidura, one who hears this narration concerning the understanding of the living entity's spiritual existence as described by the great sage Nārada, or who relates it to others, will be liberated from the bodily conception of life. This narration spoken by the great sage Nārada is full of the transcendental fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, this narration, when described, certainly sanctifies this material world. It purifies the heart of the living entity and helps him attain the spiritual identity. One who relates this transcendental narration will be liberated from all material bondage and will no longer have to wander within this material world. This allegory of King Puranjana, described herein according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master and is full of spiritual knowledge. If one can understand the purpose of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. Although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration. Should I read the
Yes, please, ma'am. Yeah, if that's
A
okay.
desire to maintain body, wife, and children is also observed in animal society. The animals have full intelligence to manage such affairs. If a human being is simply advanced in this respect, what is the difference between him and an animal? One should be very careful to understand that this human life is attained after many, many births in the evolutionary process. A learned man who gives up the bodily conception of life, both gross and subtle, will by the enlightenment of spiritual knowledge become a prominent individual spirit soul as the Supreme Lord is also. I'll just read again. A learned man who gives up the bodily conception of life, both gross and subtle, will, by the enlightenment of spiritual knowledge, become a prominent individual spirit soul, as the Supreme Lord is also. If a living entity is developed in Krishna consciousness and is merciful to others, and if his spiritual knowledge of self-realization is perfect, he will immediately attain liberation from the bondage of material existence. Everything happening within time, which consists of past, present, and future, is merely a dream. That is the secret understanding in all Vedic literature. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, thank you all so much for reading so nicely. Yeah, so now we'll just go into our discussion. We'll just start the prayers first. Om Gyanatim Ranjashar Gyananjana Shalakya Chakshurmilitam Mena Shashmaya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupam Kadamam Dadati Sarpadadikam Vandhyam Shri Guru Shri Utapadabalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sargajatam Sargana Raghunatham Vitam Samta Jivanam Sadhvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sargana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopitaka Kanta Radha Ganta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakapatru Kapasi Raivaja Paritanam Pavanima Vishnu Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Yeah. So please let me know if you can't see my screen or if I'm not audible well. So yeah, now where we are, like we just quickly went through the recap that we are done with the main allegorical story of Puranjana, and now the king got all his doubts clear and whatnot, and now we are at the next part. So now Nārada Muni is also giving him another allegory, which is a shorter one. So he's saying, so there's a comparison of the deer who's just busy, enjoying the grass with his mate, and there are flowers, there's beautiful aroma, and he's hearing to the sweet songs of the bumblebee. So what everything means in this context? First, like the deer enjoying the grass, that is like us or a man in his household life with his wife, enjoying the pleasures of the senses and whatnot. And then the sweet song of bumblebee, like we as individuals, we really like when we discuss about, let's say, our wife, children, or I may be happy discussing about my wedding ceremony and all these different things. So this is compared to the sweet songs of the bumblebee, that he's really engrossed in it. He's enjoying the grass, his mate, the songs. But in this whole thing, he's completely lost track of time, which is like a tiger in front of him. So even we, or anyone for that matter, as household especially, we are working, 8 hours job and just busy running, or even if apparently we think we are enjoying this whole life, but what we are missing out or what we keep forgetting is like we are also running out of time. every year. Like literally, we feel this year just started and now it's already going to end. So we tend to forget, like in last to last class, Jagannath Gopal Prabhu said that we all know that death is there, but we just feel that, okay, there's still time. But actually, life is really short. So we always tend to forget the time factor. And then there's a hunter. So in front of him is the tiger, which is the time, and behind him is hunter, which is like death. So you're running out of time. And also there is death, which is like, as we say, it's as sure as death. So that's why, so Nardmani is telling him all these things that, see, this is how your situation is. You're like this deer. So you need to give up this household life and, go to forest and worship the Supreme Lord. So what are like the main concepts that come from this allegory was forgetfulness with respect to death and time. So like we discussed, like we are very much prone to, because we get busy, and it can happen in any different type of ashrama that we are in, but especially in grahastha ashrama, because in that there is apparent enjoyment or pleasure or comfort. There's a lot of warmth in grahastha ashrama. So, and even like Prahlad Maharaj, he said that it's like it can become like a blind well. And so like if you really want to actually worship Krishna, or one of the ways he suggested is to leave everything and abandon everything and go to the forest of Vrindavan. And also in the purports, Prabhupada has described or did this comparison with nectar and poison. Like initially anything, or so this in the verses it's written like a wife. So her initially she's young and there's youth. So it's compared to a flower. A wife is compared to a flower. Like the flowers can be beautiful. It has nice fragrance, looks pretty. But ultimately later on, so with a wife, a family will grow. Then you have more demands, responsibilities, and whatnot. Like it's a long, long way, and there will be difficulties. Same as a flower wilting. And this is very so this reminds me of like one of my very first classes, and actually the first live lecture and the first lecture I attended of Chaitanya Chand Prabhu in Bhakti Center. He gave this poison and nectar theory. He just drew like two things, like how he does, so he had poison and nectar. He said what feels like poison now will be nectar later, and what feels like nectar now will be poison later. So that is like a very, very common concept that we all know. So I won't be going much into detail, but definitely it's very prominent. And like here we are talking about family life, but it can be extended to anything, like let's say watching Netflix, or maybe eating something which is not good for me. Maybe I'm eating something fried. So even these little things, or the third example can be, leaving your rounds for the evening, that I'll do it in the evening. And so in the morning, I'm just chilling, doing my thing. And then at the end of the day, there's so many rounds. So that is the idea. And similarly, here Prabhupada and Nardmuni, they've also compared the fruitative activities and mental speculations to cups of poison. So we feel that many times people do different fruitative activities to please the demigods, to get something, and just to be materially well and stuff. So they feel that it's going to be nectarsome. So in this case, they have this idea of nectar. But what happens is that maybe you might get in that same birth, you might get the boon of whatever activity you're doing, but this would lead to a next life, because while doing that fruitative activities, you're building desires, and you're building on to something that will that is creating your next life's body. And this is something that's actually like the main part or the main discussion of this entire group of verses that we are doing today, but we'll be just going to that very soon. And so what happens now is that Nardmuni has asked king to go to Vanprastha and kind of lead his life there and worship the god. But the question is, like what all I spoke now, even speaking it, or even when I was saying, it just felt so unnatural for me. Not unnatural, but because we all know this thing, we read these things, but how do we, as devotees, how do we navigate this? How do we understand? So I'll just open it up for discussion for this part. Like here they have we have been reading that how we can get bound in our material life, our activities. So how to understand this? We definitely, at least, it's very difficult to kind of do what all we just read. Maybe let's say to, like how Prahlad Maharaj said, go to Vrindavan or take Vanprastha, or wife, or that matter, wife we can just replace with spouse. Maybe, they are always going to bind you. So how we as devotees should understand this? Perfect. Okay. Yeah, Ritesh Prabhu has, that's,
There is a nice purport about marriage in order to give solace to Ritesh Prabhu and Nandini Mataji. I'll try to find it till others speak. Yeah.
so was my question clear? Like, so the idea is just very simple, that we all just read everything, which sounds amazing, but at least for me as a person, when I was even saying this, I felt that it's just too lofty and I can't do this. So what should we do if I cannot do what all I read? So what's the solution?
So just what one thing that comes to my mind is there are certain principles. So there is this concept called as a ladder of abstraction. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu has spoken about it, and that's how I came to know about it. So the ladder of abstraction, it means that when you study a text, especially religious literature, scriptural literature, so those texts have been written long ago. Okay, and there is a social context. There is a kind of contextual, I would say, contextual content over there, right? Because it was written, or the stories took place in a very different social context, in a very different era. Now, but what happens is, because they are shastras, there is a universal, timeless, eternal principle that is coming out, right? That is the reason these stories made it to the shastras. Now, what the acharya does is, the acharya who is coming in a bona fide Guru Parampara, what that acharya does is he takes that timeless principle from that contextual story or whatever it is, right? And he extracts that timeless principle, and then he, based on his realization and his selfless nature to uplift the people in the world that he is in the time that he is in, he takes that timeless principle and applies it to the current context in which he or she is, right? So yes, there are certain principles that are said, right? We might see certain details. For example, even in this story, right, there are certain details, like Narad Muni is exhorting Prācīnabarhi to leave home and go and leave Grihasthashram, take to Vanaprastha, and that's what he does also. Prācīnabarhi goes, leaves the home, goes to the forest, right? So that is the specific contextual story, but the principle there is detachment from things that are temporary, detachment from things that will not that are not conducive to our bhakti, anukulasya sankalpa pratikulasya varjanam, right? Like that. So that is the principle, and then we have to see that how that principle applies to us based on the teachings given by our current acharyas, based on the teachings given by Srila Prabhupada, based on the teachings given by our gurus, and our mentors, like that. So it needs to be understood in context, because if we take these things out of context, we might take it in context in the sense of the story itself, but we might be taking it out of context in terms of the era that we live in, the world that we live in, right? And a specific situation that we ourselves personally might be going through. So like that, there is guidance needed. But yeah, that is what I hope that it was not so complicated, but yeah.
Yeah, Prabhu, it was beautiful, not at all complicated, made so much of sense. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Ritesh, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I just was thinking about the question, And recently we read Grahastha Manual by, I think it was compiled and produced by like ISKCON Desire Tree. I saw that, and Gaurakumar Prabhu actually shared with me, and me and Nandini recently read it. There is a good, like, nice sentence which I want to read, which will basically give a good insight onto your question. Like, it says, every grihastha should endeavor to train his family members in Krishna consciousness. In such a household where all the members are Krishna conscious, there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. So we should endeavor to basically train our in a nice way, in a non-forceful way. We should train family members to get into Krishna consciousness, I think. And then, yeah, we don't have to. It's not a requirement, but more like what is, as Jagannath Gopal Prabhu said, what is favorable for your devotional practice. Yeah.
Amazing, Prabhu. Yeah, that's a great explanation. It's very similar to, so we were listening to Radhesham Prabhu today. Like you said, so the idea is to make everything spiritual. And first, like how JGP said that about the context, and secondly, how to make everything spiritual. Like in your family, so what we heard today was that there's family life and everything, but if each member of the family is involved in raising the deities, doing some other things, then it just automatically becomes spiritual. And one thing, just not for married life, but just for like material life in general, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also mentioned that instead of plunging into so it's like an ocean. So instead of plunging into it, we can accept enough things or sufficient things that are required to maintain our body and soul together. But again, it's like per person, contextual, and how it's like per case how everyone's life is. So yeah, thank you all. Now just a quick thing about fruitative activities. Although there's a lot in this chapter, but the main part is like the transmigration of soul, but just wanted to cover these interesting ones before that. So there's a thing, we know people say that, oh, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. And also people, many times mosques and temples, they're not able to attract people, especially if someone is intellectual or like the youth. And we recently, I saw this in a movie. It was something about like an atheist and a spiritualist. But yeah, this I've written wrong. It's a typo, sorry. So many times people think that the opposite of an atheist is like a ritualist, like someone who's doing just a lot of fruitative yagnas and pleasing different demigods. So there's a lot of misunderstanding. So the question is that why cannot the current temples and mosques and churches, they cannot attract people? Why are people running away from religion? So any thoughts? Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
So, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I don't have my screen up.
No worries.
Can I go, Mataji?
Sure, Prabhu. Yes, please.
So, that's a really good question. Why can't churches and mosques attract or temples attract people to come there? I think this is just my perception. I think most people, are spiritual, but somehow they get turned off by the concept of religion and rituals. And also there is a history of religion being involved in in disagreements in society. So a lot of people who, typically people who are young, they have an immediate distrust for religion and religious institutions. So, one thing that the religious institutions can do is make themselves, separate themselves from, all these perceptions, being involved in political or with, other things. They can separate themselves from that And the other thing that they can do is they can try to appeal to, all forms of all forms of seekers. Even Krishna says, Arti, Artharti, Jigyasu, Jnani. If our religious institutions could appeal to all types of people, people at different levels of, different, no, I shouldn't say levels, different, who are seeking different things, and make avenues for them, then maybe more people will come. This is just my thoughts, Mataji.
They're amazing. Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense that, actually catering to everyone's need and like touching their heart in the right way so that, they are not running away. And, even how Prabhupada wrote in one of the purports was that why they cannot attract is because they cannot elevate the followers to the platform of knowledge. Because many people who are into all these rituals or who are, let's say, part of any of these different organizations, if they are still stuck or focused on the fruitative results, that means they themselves haven't reached the platform of knowledge or understanding the Supreme Personality. So it's very difficult for them to elevate the consciousness of someone else. So they don't hit the nail on the head, we can say. Yeah, so that's why that was like one of the reasoning that Prabhupada gave, that why, how these fruitative activities are kind of preventing the actual path of self-realization. It's not clearing that out. Yeah, and the next question is how to actually give up rituals, but this we'll just quickly go through it so that we can go to the next section. Yeah, so how, because why this question is that how to give up rituals is because people are scared. Like I mean, of course, the Vrajvasis are elevated, but and they didn't have that kind of thinking. But even when Krishna was trying to convince them, they didn't want Indradevta to feel bad. But we as materialists or anyone else as a materialist, they are even at a different platform. So they are not just worried about a demigod feeling bad. They are also worried that if the demigod feels bad, they won't get whatever they want. So again, it comes to the idea of having the right knowledge and knowing Krishna. And the very famous verse that Krishna is saying that abandon everything and surrender unto me. So I felt that, the three words, he's saying, do not fear. Why not fear? Like, do not fear in abandoning it. But how will that fearlessness come? It will come from surrender. But why will we surrender to Krishna? We'll surrender if we have the knowledge of who Krishna is, or having that right knowledge or gyan about the super soul. So yeah. And then what happens next in our story is so the king, now we are back to the king. We have, Nārada Muni explained him and he's satisfied. He's happy with the answers. And he's also saying that how the different acharyas who told him to, do these activities, how they did not have that knowledge, the transcendental knowledge to kind of know what is the actual good. But then the king asks a question, which many people might ask us, or if anyone goes for preaching, or they are in especially touch with younger generation, they would say that how is it possible that I'm committing something in this body, but I suffer or enjoy the reactions in my next birth, in a next body? They are two different bodies. So how is that possible? So king asked Nārada Muni that. So the idea is that we have two bodies. So this entire chapter, like from here, it's more like technical, and they are explaining how everything works, how the transmigration, dreams, reincarnation, how all of these things take place. So first, our gross body is our actual body. I mean, what we think of the body made with bones and whatever, the one made with all the elements. And then the subtle body is the mind, intelligence, and ego. And definitely we can go into depth of all these three, but when I was going through the purports, it felt like how the mind is kind of, making everything happen because of the desires. So the idea is that because of whatever this subtle body is doing, or its activities, whether they're pious or impious, we constantly keep creating the situation for the next body. So, and then how it happens, because if I'm in this body, my subtle body is the same body that will get carried to the next body. And the super soul, who's the Paramatma in my heart, he'll remind me that, okay, in my previous body, I wanted to do plan A, B, C. So I just did plan A. So in the next body, B and C are remaining. So then I'll do those plans. And while executing plans B and C, I'll get more desires. And that way, I'm taking care of my previous desires. And at the same time, I'm creating more and more desires and more false identities. And that's how I'm creating my next body. So I'm just preparing next and next scene of the whole play somehow. And so one thing here is that all this transmigration, reincarnation, why the modern scientists, they cannot understand. Even Darwin tried to understand it. But the idea is because they don't have the knowledge of subtle body and soul. So it's very difficult for them to connect the dots. Yeah. And then going further, again, like because of the ego, the false identification, I'll think, okay, I'm this, I'm that, this is my duty. So there's a lot of mental impressions, because the mind, it is just like a big hard disk, and it's storing things from all these different previous births and different whatever surroundings I was in or anyone was in, the environments, everything is getting stored in the mind. And because of this long duration of conditioning, I tend to identify with my gross body. But the fact is that all these things are temporary. But because of my the false identification, but Krishna is so merciful that if the living entity wants to enjoy, he's like, okay, you go and enjoy. If I have this desire, if I want to be the enjoyer, and if I do not remember, if I forget that Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer, then Krishna, he's like, he wants to give us that will and the freedom. He's like, okay, you want to enjoy, have your XYZ desire fulfilled, then please go and do that. But the problem is that when I'm doing that, then I'm making more desires. So again, as Nārada says, we make plans, and at the time of death, our plans in our subtle body, the plans are there in our mind. So they come with us to the next gross body. And based on those plans, we get the next gross body at the time of death. And again, then the super soul reminds us. So, and finally, like we just heard, that the mind is like a storehouse with everything. So similarly, whatever our condition of current mind, it also represents our past body as well as our future body. So just by someone's interactions and whatnot, there are so many things that we can kind of devise about their previous body. But why are we learning all this? It's not to kind of let's say know what was my last birth like and do it on more like of a just decoding a mystery or like, oh, it's an advent. Some people enjoy this, oh, how was my last life, and they were like TV shows on this. But why are we reading all this is, if we won't understand what is the circle, how we are in this never-ending circle, so we won't know that how to tangent out of it. So that is why we are just going through the whole concept of what is a mind, like what is reincarnation, dreams, memories. And so all these verses, there are a lot of description that's even given about reincarnations, dreams, memory. So reincarnation we more or less discussed. Now even dreams, in our dreams we get things that we have never heard or experienced. So how can we, like, if it's a child, if I'm 16 years old and I've never seen how, I don't know, Mount Everest looks, but how can I dream of Mount Everest? Because that impression, that memory was in my mind, which has been with me since all these past lives. And I might have learned about Mount Everest in one of the lives. And similarly, like, there are so many other things that, and so it's said, Prabhupada is saying that it's not possible for anything to appear in a mind which we're not aware about. So we have to be aware about that thing. And other examples are like, there are people who are scared of water and whatever, water, fire. So it is based on their past experiences. And in the purpose, it's mentioned that the dreams are combination of different images. So you might see a golden bridge in your dream, which doesn't exist, but you might have seen gold somewhere and a bridge. So you just combine them. So again, all these things, it's about how the mind is a storehouse. And it's such a good storehouse that it is storing things from several births and deaths. Now, so this is what we learned, but now we have to see what next. We learned this, so how can we kind of use this information to go closer to Krishna? But before we answer that, let's answer one question. You must have heard that a child is innocent, and we love all the children. They are very sweet, cute, innocent. But is it true? Like, do they have no desires? People think that, a child is totally innocent and sweet, but is it true? Like, are they liberated? Are they without any desires or karma? So if anyone wants to kind of, give their thoughts for this one.
Can I go?
So, please.
Definitely not. Definitely not. Having a kid, I know that, they have certain inclinations, they have certain likes, dislikes. Yeah, I mean, of course, at this age, at what age Prithu is, things keep changing very rapidly. But still, it is the fact that those are there. It doesn't mean that they're just randomly popping up. So something has been there. Like he existed before, due to which he is exhibiting whatever he's exhibiting now. So definitely, I mean, it's there are desires, but they are latent. They are not. They are kind of dormant. But then when the correct stimuli, is created around them, those desires will start manifesting. So is how I understand it.
That's an amazing explanation, Prabhu. And like how you said that they are latent desires. And also, I remember, like we both remember, whenever you talk about Prithu, you say that, okay, we are training him and, we're telling about Krishna, like, we're teaching him different things, the nice things. But then you say that, how his life will be, it depends on how he is, like, whatever is his conditioning. And which, of course, is great because, he's born into a devotee family. But yeah, like Prabhu rightly said, there are a lot of latent desires. So does anyone else has something to add on for this point?
Yeah, I can go. Um, yeah, so I'm not sure about the desire. So, for example, there are many kids who, get a disease or something while as soon as it's born. Um, it looks like just makes me think that, or even gets a stillbirth, right? Like which means that the baby doesn't live outside of the womb, and so many things happen that just makes me think that the desire is probably so strong that okay, I came in, but then I don't want to be here, right? So maybe it is latent, but at the same time it's very strong. And then as far as the karma is concerned, I mean, I remember hearing in one lecture that the karma actually starts accumulating at the age of 7 and then up until 79. So after a person turns 80, so before 7 and after 80, the karma doesn't count. So that's what I've heard in multiple lectures actually. So yeah, I mean children before 6 or 7. Yeah, they are they liberated? What is the what is the why is the word liberated there? I mean, what was the context, Vrinda?
Yeah, so basically, so in Prabhupada's words, he's saying that children, so in what he's saying in that context, he's like, oh, children are not innocent. So he's just connecting liberated with having no desires or having no conditioning in the subtle body that would lead to a gross body, like the next gross body.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. Like, for example, if I mean, just in the event of some, there's a death of a child that happens before 7 or something. They are liberated is what the context is, or like before they accrue karma.
Yeah, so the context is like, is a child a blank canvas?
Okay. I have to say no. I don't know. Like, I don't, there was never a blank slate. I don't think so.
Yeah,
It may not have the child may not have the necessary, not like the equipments to act out or carry out the desire, but the desires will definitely be there. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. So I think children do come with their preconditionings, all their all the tendencies that they accumulated in past lives. But to Nitya Mataji's point, maybe they don't start forming new tendencies in their current life until the age of 7. So they don't start forming new habits and new patterns because and also because when they're children, they probably are more innocent, and that's why that's why they don't get the because the intention is not there. Going back to Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's intent, content, and intent of the action, content of the action, and
Consequence.
consequence of the action. Yeah. So maybe maybe their actions don't have the intention, so maybe that's why they don't accumulate karmas. But they definitely come with strong tendencies which they're carrying from previous lives. They have we are given the opportunity in this life to work through those tendencies, but sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just continue with those same tendencies throughout the life.
Yeah, Prabhu. That makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so they were like such great points that everyone mentioned, like how, yes, a child does have desires, but how they, like you all said, that they don't take that shape that soon. And so basically, like, how we were talking about that they might be latent or they might not be active yet. So yes, all the 10 senses in the mind. So in the youth, they are active, but in the womb or childhood, which like I wasn't aware it's the age of 7. So like Mataji and Prabhu mentioned that by the age of 7. So until that time, they remain covered like this because there's lesser interaction of senses. So that interaction of senses and mind. So they're more covered during those stages. But of course, later on, when the child grows, they do get developed. And when the senses of the body get developed, they start acting. Until that time, they don't act on the subtle body. So the child, at least, they definitely have their previous desires conditioning, but they won't create new ones for a larger part of it. So when we say innocent child, Prabhupada is saying it mostly refers to inactive senses. And then, of course, as the child grows into a, like a man or a girl, so then these senses, they start interacting with the subtle body, and of course then the whole thing happens. But I really like how Mataji added one point, like in some children when they like there are some souls who really do not have the desire to start this cycle, so that desire to be closer to Krishna. So like she was mentioning, if there's like a stillbirth or something, so in those cases, yeah, maybe the soul will have such a strong desire to go to Krishna that they won't accept this gross body. And these things were also written in the purports, but I, in for lack of time, I wasn't covering them. But Prabhupada has mentioned about coma, like there are many so like how Mataji mentioned, a child might not be ready to accept the gross body. There might be people who don't want to leave their gross body, especially politicians and the people who are materially very affluent. They are in coma because their subtle body is not ready to leave that gross body, so they are literally holding on to that. That's why because their material life was very happy in their mind, at least, so they just want to stick to that. And and all these things, like what we learned about the child, it again supports reincarnation, because we cannot say that a child is a clean slate. So all these different things, what we learned because of King Prācīnabarhi's question, that how are two bodies related, but that's because they are gross bodies, but the subtle body is the same in all these different gross bodies, so that's how they're related, and that is like one of the bases of reincarnation. Again, so the conclusion is that the subtle body, mind, intelligence, ego, it creates an atmosphere with the desires, ambitions, plan, and it kind of becomes the root or the seed for the next body. And Krishna says that, like we all know, that whenever we are quitting our body, if at that time we are thinking of Krishna, then we will attain him without fail. But whatever state we are thinking, if I'm thinking of, let's say my example, if I'm thinking of traveling, then maybe I have to take 20 more births and become a travel blogger, for like, if I can find like the worst example right now. So yeah, and like we all of us practicing or being in the movement since some time, we know that life is a preparation for the examination, which is the death. So we learned so much about this whole, gross body, subtle body, mind, desires. But the question is that how to get out of the clutches of the subtle body. So yeah, if any points, any reflections to get out of the clutches of everything.
That's the whole crux of our movement. Is yeah, to how to prepare for the exam, right? How to get out is yeah, I mean, Prabhupada has given like one simple formula. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. It sounds very simple, but it's definitely not easy. Especially when, we are so, as the Kali Yuga progresses, some more and more distractions come in the way, and it definitely causes us to kind of go astray from the main goal. There are several agents, Maya's agents are there everywhere to just pull us out of the reality and bind us even more. But this is when we have to constantly be in the association of the devotees. There's a whole process that Prabhupada has laid out. The 5 items, the important items of bhakti, right? Deities, devotees, Dham, Harinam, Bhagavatam. So if you just keep in touch with these, like deities, going to the temple, devotees are getting in association with the devotees, Dham, visiting the Dhams. Dham means, it doesn't mean that we have to visit Vrindavan Dham and Mayapur Dham every month or something. But our local temples are also Dham. Even our house, which is also a temple of our Lord. And deities, devotees, Dham, Harinam, like, doing the chanting of the holy names, either in the form of japa or kirtan. And then reading Bhagavatam, constantly listening. I think these 5 items of bhakti will help us always to remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. Always like keep all these 5 important items of bhakti close to our heart. I think, and Prabhupada's, always say that Krishna wants us to just try our best. And then he just wants to see that we are putting the sincere effort. That's all. Whether we succeed in it or not, whether we will get out of it or not, we don't know. But Krishna wants us to see that we are putting the sincere effort. And yeah, that's all I have to share. Thank you.
That was beautiful, ma'am. Just so perfectly summarized everything. And I like the last part a lot from, yeah, Jagannath Gopal Prabhu, please.
So I was just thinking by reading this question, how to get out of the clutches of subtle body, right? So I was thinking that, I mean, even when I'm thinking, I'm actually utilizing my subtle body, if you look at it, right? So what I was trying to get at is the subtle body is actually like a tool, right? So when we talk about getting out of the clutches of the subtle body, one way to look at it is, yes, get liberated, get rid of the subtle body and whatnot. Another way to think about it is, and that totally getting rid of the subtle body is not possible, at least in an embodied condition. It is not possible. Maybe at death it will happen if we have perfected our life in Krishna consciousness. But till we are here as sadhakas in the present body, right, the subtle body can be used as a tool, in the sense that when we say get out of the clutches of the subtle body, we can think of it as getting out of the debilitating effect that the subtle body can have on us, like that. So what I mean by that is the subtle body is a tool, and the subtle body can be trained according to higher intelligence. And that higher intelligence comes from shastras, comes from, Guru Sadhu Shastra, essentially. So in an embodied condition, we can think of it as, training our subtle body. Mataji mentioned about, always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So even to remember Krishna in an embodied state, we need our subtle body. We need our mind, which is material in nature. It bhinna prakriti, Krishna says in the Gita. So yeah, so we could use the subtle body as a tool, and then to train it in a way that remembering Krishna becomes the default. And in that sense, it's in a way Yukta Vairagya. What Yukta Vairagya says that you don't give up, don't immaturely give up, but utilize whatever you have in Krishna's service. Similarly, we can't give up the subtle body immediately, but at least till we have it, we could utilize it in Krishna's service by thinking of Krishna and whatnot. Yeah, that's
really
all.
Mhm. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu, Gautam Prabhu, please.
So very briefly, I like this question very much, and even the way it is worded, how to get out of the clutches of subtle body. The simplest answer is to not think you are the body. So I'll explain in some detail here. So when we die, the Yamadutas come and they try to pull the soul, but the soul is immovable. It is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita that nobody can move the soul. But what they do is they put the rope around the subtle body and pull the subtle body. So when the Yamadutas pull the subtle body, because the soul is so attached to the body, the soul starts moving behind the subtle body because it's so attached to the subtle body. So during our lifetime, along with reducing our desires, we must clearly understand and realize that we are not the body. And we must give up our attachment to the gross and subtle body and increase our attachment to Krishna. If we do that, then the Yamadutas cannot even move the soul, because even if they move the subtle body, because we are not attached to the subtle body, we will not move towards the Yamadutas. But if the soul cultivates a desire to just connect with Krishna all the time, then at the time of death also the soul immediately goes to Krishna, because the soul is not attached to the body at all. I don't know if that answers, Vrinda. So sorry, it's a long answer.
So it was so beautiful. Really, it was amazing. And like all the answers, and especially, how you explained how the ropes are tied to the subtle body. It was really nice. And actually, there's still some more slides, but my last question was like, that I read all of this, but why can't I connect to what all I'm reading? Why can't I do in that way? But all the answers that all of you gave, that really helps me to kind of take up some, the different teachings that are there in this. Thank you all.
So I'll just mention three things. Sorry, just one last point on this. Why we cannot connect to Krishna all the time, or why we are not so serious in our Krishna consciousness. It is explained that there are three reasons. The first one is when we get under stress, then we forget Krishna. The second one is boredom. We keep doing the same thing every day, and then we are not able to connect to Krishna. And the third one is loneliness. So these three things are like Maya's agents to make sure that the jiva is somehow bound to this material world. I'll repeat again, and this we experience all the time. When we are under a lot of stress, we don't think of Krishna so much. Or when we become lazy or bored, we don't think of Krishna. And the last one is also important because when we are extremely lonely or alone, then also we don't think of Krishna. So somehow we must make sure that when these three things come, we must understand that this is Maya's attack and overcome these three things and connect to Krishna at that time. If you're able to connect to Krishna during stress, during loneliness, and during boredom, and you come out of that, then Krishna, you're past the test of Maya. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, very nice, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Ritesh, Prabhu, please.
Yeah, thank you, Gaurakumar Prabhu. I think I relate to that a lot. And I think during that time, even our mind or intellect is not with us. Like when there is a stress or loneliness or boredom, I think seeking a devotee help during that time, just talking to someone, and they can, because they are not in that position, then they can help us to connect Krishna again, and basically relate our situations on how this is actually keeping us away from Krishna. Yeah, so if we get this agents, just yeah, that could be the one thing. Instead of trying to do it by ourselves, we can seek help. That's it.
Yeah, it was a great thought, Prabhu. Yes, like yeah, even I have personally felt, especially the stress part of it, when we're like, oh my God, work is hectic, and then we just forget Krishna and just into that whole 9 to 5 or 9 to 8, 9 to 9, whatever we are doing. Yeah, so it's nice that how Prabhu said he enlisted the three agents, so we can always be like mindful of them, and how Ritesh Prabhu mentioned that how it's always good to be around devotees, at least to kind of handle the loneliness part of it. Yeah, so these are just some of the things that I jotted down for the question how to get off the subtle bodies clutches or how to decontaminate it. They are what all we just discussed. Krishna, always just being engaged in different activities of devotional service, and one of and then unless one becomes a devotee. Yeah, and then there's one more thing that there's another question, which is that what happens to our old desires? It's again like something more on a technical ground. So we'll just quickly go through it. That many times, yeah, I'm like we are studying, we have all these desires, but there might be a situation that a person is a devotee and then they are doing everything as they're supposed to do, and then there's true surrender to Krishna. So what Krishna does at that time, he will so instead of giving that desire to the person one by one, they will show him the stockpile of desires, just like similar to how he showed Mother Yashoda the universe with in his mouth, and then he'll make his desires diminish and just prevent all these future transmigrations. So this is just a more technical explanation, but one thing that we can learn from this is the fact that this is where the mercy comes. Previously we learned about what all we can do. We can train ourselves, we can practice different things, which is very, very much required. But one thing that is very important is Krishna's mercy. So like how Mataji mentioned, that what Prabhupada says is that he's seeing your efforts, that Krishna really want to do this. So when Krishna sees the efforts, all these technical things and this, subtle body soul, all the whole connections and mapping, Krishna takes care of them. And yeah, that's how he makes it work. And so for the interest of time, I'm just kind of going through them. Prabhu, how much time we have? I mean, until 10 we should do?
You can go on. You can go on.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
It doesn't, it's okay if it exceeds beyond 10, but yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, since we got some more time. Next question we can again take for everyone. What if we are not successful in this life? I mean, what if we tried everything, nothing worked out? So then what?
Not successful materially or spiritually?
Yeah, as in if we did not go back to Krishna in this life, then like spiritually.
Okay, okay. So that's what Nitya is also asking. Define success. Okay.
We won't know until we as long as we are in this life, we won't know, right? That's the thing. Like whoever is here will not know the other side. Whoever has gone to the other side can never come back and tell this side. So, so I guess I'm not sure. That is the whole thing, right? If that problem is solved, then whoever has left the world, if they can come back and say, hey, I've done this, that would be the best.
Yeah, that'll be great.
But I don't think there is that is the whole paradoxical thing. Anyway, Jagannath Gopal Prabhu wants to say something.
I think, yes, on a practical level, we don't know whether we are going to be successful or not. We may get some pointers, but again, it's interesting that how should I put it? When a devotee is a pure devotee, that devotee doesn't really care in terms of whether his spiritual practice has been successful or not. That is not the thing that occupies his or her mind. At that level, the only thing that occupies his or her mind is Krishna, remembering Krishna. So in that sense, but yes, this question was posed by Arjuna to Krishna as well. What if I don't make it? And then he gives a nice analogy. He says, what if I'm a cloud, right? A cloud, a cloud that separates out from the original cloud and doesn't have anywhere to go also. It's like just loitering somewhere, that small cloud. Something like that, he asks. What happens to an unsuccessful yogi? And Krishna says that, Shuchinam Shrimatam Gehe Yogo Brashto Vijayate. You will get a birth, you can continue the process and all. We all know that. We all know that. We keep hearing that, Krishna will give us another chance and all that. But yeah, I guess that is the thing. And yeah, it's interesting that the one who is truly successful in spiritual life doesn't care about success in spiritual life, but only cares about Krishna consciousness. Being conscious of Krishna, remembering Krishna. Yeah.
Yeah, Prabhu, that makes so much sense, that the one who's truly successful, he doesn't care about success. It's very nice, Prabhu. Thank you. And yeah, like you mentioned from Bhagavad Gita, yes, Krishna says that if you're not successful, yeah, in next life, he will give you the right position and facilities to focus on that. And yeah, like Vallabh Chetna Prabhu has also mentioned, focusing on the journey and not on the end goal. Yes. So like Prabhupada says that chant Hare Krishna and be happy. So I heard it, and we all have heard somewhere that what does Prabhupada means? That should we chant and then be happy, or we should be happy while chanting? So it's both ways. You should be happy while chanting, and then you'll be happy eternally. So the idea is to just be happy in the service. And the other thing is, yeah, if I'm doing service, or if someone's like, even in our new Vrindavan Yatra, how we were discussing, like the Mataji who was cleaning Radha Damodar temple, Prabhupada said she will go back to Godhead. So when we take our present life services as, we do them with that sincerity or that love, that this is my spiritual service, then there's no difference. And yeah, yesterday we were listening to a journaling workshop by one of the Prabhus from Chopati temple, and he said, solve the easy question first. So in your life, so the easy question is just serving Krishna and be happy. So why should we worry about answering the next question? Yeah, so mostly, even if we're not successful, we shouldn't worry about success. We are mostly worried about loving Krishna. Yep. And so these were mostly what all happened. And there's actually a lot more. But for now, this is where we reach. So we discussed, like Narad Muni explained everything to King Prācīnabarhi. And after hearing this, he was so enlightened that he went, and before leaving, Narad Muni had also invited him to Siddhaloka. And so now King Prācīnabarhi, he left for Kapilashrama. That's the same place where Lord Kapila performed his austerities. It's near Ganga Sagar. But the interesting thing is, and yeah, he went and he did the austerities and he attained love for God. And in the verse they've written that the qualitatively equal position to that of the Supreme Personality. So, like, we know that we are qualitatively equal to Krishna, but not quantitatively. But the idea is he left orders for his sons. So the main thing is that he did not even wait for his sons to return or tell him that, okay, I'm going to the forest, because his sons were performing austerities underwater. But he understood that, okay, this is my true meaning, this is what I need to do, and he took the right step and went. And this is a beautiful, happy story, happy ending, and whatnot. But when we read it, our question comes, how did he get so lucky? Like, I've written lucky, I couldn't find a better word. But it was, if you think about it, King is happily performing his fruitative activities and animal sacrifices, and then Narad Muni comes himself and tells him that, okay, this is the true meaning of life. He tells him about soul and the super soul. And then he's able to do everything and go back to Godhead. So what are the right things that he did? What can we learn from this story, in short? Yeah, Prabhu.
This is a beautiful question. I mean, yeah, this is a really beautiful question to which I don't have a very clear answer, but I'll try. So, there are two things, right? First thing is that the king, he actually he opened his heart out to Narad Muni. He gave, he was receptive to hear what Narad Muni was speaking. Now, that itself can give perfection, because we know that any one of the 9 processes can give us perfection. I mean, scriptures are very clear. It's not that hearing will only take you up to this level. No, hearing can give you perfection. Parikshit Maharaj is one example, and King Prācīnabarhi also seems to be an example of that. Although the liberation that he got, I don't know if Prabhupada has defined that. I don't know if he went back to Godhead or did he get Brahman liberation or something like that. But yeah, so any one of the processes of bhakti is also enough to get us perfection. But that said, for Kali Yuga, we also need to remember that chanting is the process, and that is in the Shastras as well. So for Kali Yuga, chanting is the only process that will take us back to Godhead. I mean, other processes will have the potency to take us back to Godhead, but we don't have the ability to tap the essence of those processes to the extent that we'll be able to perfect our lives, is what the scriptures say. And the other thing is, there are certain examples in the Shastras that are meant to serve as examples and not taken to be norms, kind of a thing. There is this what is that? Kailash. Who was that? Was it Kailash or somebody? Like, I think Lord Narayan in Vaikuntha tells Narad Muni that you can bring one person to Vaikuntha, he says. Any one person you choose, you can bring that person to Vaikuntha. And then Narad Muni goes, he picks one person and then he asks that person, come, I'll take you back to God. I think it was Kailash story, which Vallabh Chaitanya Prabhu covered this Saturday at Krishna House. So there are these examples, right? What we call as Kripa Siddha, maybe, that is one term sometimes used. And then that there is the story of Ajamil, right? Ajamil also, just there was, somehow it happened that he chanted the name of Narayan, even unintentionally, right? So these, one of my friends asked me a question when I read that section. Then I was excitedly telling her, she is not a devotee or anything, but a very intellectual person. I was telling her that, oh, this person, he, did all sorts of nonsense. And then at the end of his life, he called out to his son who was named Narayan. And then he was not taken by the Yamadutas. And then, she was immediately turned off by that. She said, you're telling me this story, dude, but you are doing so many things. You're following so many rules. You don't eat onion garlic. You chant, for so many hours in a day. You do so many things. And then you're telling me that this person at the end of his life, he just chanted God's name and he got, liberated from all the reactions of his karma. Then I was actually stumped. I didn't know what to answer. And then I looked deeper into the purports of Prabhupada. So there Prabhupada mentions that the thrust of that story was the glory of the holy name. The thrust of the story is not that we can engage in anything in our entire life, and then at the end of our life we can plan it so that we can take the Lord's holy name. No, that is not the thrust. The thrust is that the holy name is so great that despite such things it can deliver one person. So if despite the life that Ajamil lived, despite that, if the holy name delivered him, then how intensely should we be taking shelter of the holy name? That is the conclusion of the story, right? So yeah, there are these two things, right? Certain examples are there which serve a particular purpose. And in this case, I guess King Prācīnabarhi is considered as that example of a person who from a karma kandi or karma yoga level went directly to bhakti yoga through Narad Muni's instructions. So there are examples from jnana to bhakti, from ashtanga to bhakti. From jnana to bhakti is Kumaras. They smelled the tulsi and they went. So Prācīnabarhi is considered as the example of that. Karma kandi going to the bhakti yoga through the association of a devotee. Yeah. Anyway, sorry for the long answer.
So this was so beautiful and with so much, so many gems in it. I really, yeah, even I personally am always, although I accept Ajamil's story, but maybe I don't think in that way that, okay, why he got this thing even after doing so many sinful activities. I always feel that, okay, he was not even, it wasn't intentional. If his intentional can be allowed, so why my inattentive can't be allowed? So it's a very like, um, I shouldn't be focused on being I should focus on how I can remove the inattentiveness in chanting, but I'm focused on why his unintentional was allowed. But
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
it was thank you, it was very beautiful. So yeah, then just like how you mentioned, some reflections or some things from the purports. Few things. So he was convinced. He was convinced when he heard Narad Muni and he asked clarifying questions. So he had that interest. So his guru came, but I mean, he accepted Narad Muni as his guru when he was giving instructions. And the sense of urgency, like in purports, Prabhupada has mentioned that he did not wait for his sons to return, but he left immediately. It was his duty as a king to kind of, when he's doing that transfer of powers, he needs to be there and take care of things, but he knew his prime duty, his transcendental duty. So that urgency is like maybe one of the things that I need to work on, because we like how we heard in the beginning of the discussion that the deer forgets the time factor. Similarly, many individuals, we forget the urgency. And the next thing is that, but even in spite of everything, all our efforts, Krishna says that anyone, because of it's his energy, even Maya is his energy, so it's very difficult to overcome. But if we have surrendered unto him, we can cross it. And one interesting thing in this Prabhupada is mentioned. So this is the verse 83, I think it is. 82, yeah, on the right. So the word dhiro at the end of the first line. So Prabhupada says sometimes it can also be written as dhira or vira. Dhira means sobriety and vira means heroism. He says to actually connect with Krishna, or to, when we are struggling against Maya, we need to be heroic. So, and at the same time, we need to sober to understand our position and Krishna's position. And but one thing that after reading about how he got so lucky, I felt that it was causeless mercy of Narad Muni and Krishna that he happened to be there. It felt, especially because Damodaran just went. So while reading through the entire all the verses and all, the main thing that kept coming was there are so many things written about what we can do, but again there is like one paragraph or one line about it's ultimately to the mercy. So the two fingers that play the role are efforts and Krishna's mercy. And one little story that came to my mind, I don't remember where I read it. I felt I read it in Journey Within, but I'm not sure. So King and the Oranges. King and one of his one of the people from his kingdom, he just gave him 2 oranges, but the king rewarded him with land. So there is no comparison of 2 oranges and a land, but that was his potential, that what he gave to the king, and or what it was in his power to give 2 oranges, but it was in king's power. He had so many things that he could give him the whole land. So similarly, even in our bhakti, or when we are doing something for Krishna, Vaishika Maharaj says that Krishna doesn't see what you're giving, he sees what you're keeping. So when Krishna sees it, we are giving him even, like as we say, small leaf, fruit, flower, water. But because Krishna, he has everything. So for that little effort, he would reciprocate beautifully. So it's just, I really felt, and honestly, it's the first time I read the whole Pracheta's thing, and I did not know about this whole story and the allegories. But throughout our discussions in all these Tuesdays, so it was very nice how it's just so merciful of Narad Muni to come and tell him. And similarly, in our scenario, it's so beautiful, like all of our Shiksha Gurus and the preachers, the book distributors, they're like agents of Narad Muni going out there and, asking people to connect to Krishna. Yeah. And then last thing, don't be a caterpillar. There's also small analogy of the caterpillar given, that a caterpillar, he leaves before he goes to the next leaf. Means before he leaves his current leaf, he'll find the next leaf. So that's what happens to this, like the soul or the subtle body also, that before we leave our gross body, we are creating background, we are creating the whole setup for the next gross body. So the idea is that don't be a caterpillar, because this is like this circle from sense enjoyment, and again we do something, we get a desire, and again we are creating more things. um yeah, so don't be a caterpillar. And this is just the last slide, which we kind of discussed earlier when I mentioned that, yeah, I read everything and stuff, but it was still they're saying don't do this, but I wasn't able to. Right after studying the whole chapter, I was asking Sanksho, where are we going for traveling or something random. So the desires were still there and I was working on them. But one realization is that how we need devotees for that. Like after reading, it was great, but I was still questioning how do I do this. But when I heard all of your answers, it made so much more sense that what are the different ways I can train myself and surrender and just keep showing Krishna and trying to put in effort so that he will, after I don't know, however many births, he will show his mercy. And yep. So yes, any reflections, anyone? Thank you all so much for listening for so long.
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, but very, very nicely led, Mataji. Very, very nice reflections and very nice questions you asked. Yeah, I mean, it was very nourishing, and it made everyone think about, deeply about all these things, and how you beautifully even took the technicalities and linked them very nicely with our day-to-day practice of bhakti, and the relevance of all those things. So yeah, and your candor is also worth appreciating. You're very candid. It didn't feel, if you look at it, these are very lofty concepts, but the way you sweetly covered them, it made us all feel like, yeah, this is so nice. So this is something that we could do, right? So this process of bhakti is something that is nice, we could follow. Yeah, thank you very much, Ma. Thank you.
Thanks, Prabhu.
Anyone?
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Jagannath Gopal Prabhu said, and I really liked how Vrinda had the question, and also she had prepared the answer also, like in-depth answers, which she shared later. So I really liked that, and it was not like an open-ended question. She had the answer prepared also. She wanted to hear what we would say and then open and share her thoughts as well. So I really liked that approach very much. Thank you for taking the time to listen to so many lectures and preparing so nicely, Vrinda. Excellent. It was very
Thank you.
nourishing.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, both of you. It was, I was happy I could, it was actually more nourishing for me. And thank you for your beautiful answers. They were very, very, very enlightening. Thank you all.
Yeah, I just had a couple of quick announcements if nobody else wants to speak. But so first thing is Ritesh Prabhu is leaving on Friday to India. So let's all pray for him that he has a wonderful trip in India, and let's pray that everything happens very smoothly at the wedding. This is the second wedding in our little group this year. Vrinda and Samaksh Prabhu were the first one, and now it's Ritesh Prabhu and Nandini Mataji. So that is the first announcement. And the second announcement is we're really looking for some volunteers, some devotees uh, to help with the Maha cleanup of 26th Avenue on Sunday. We'll definitely need some help because we are planning to discard a lot of stuff. We have a list of things to discard. So we'll need some hands. So if anybody is available on Sunday between 10:30 and 12 p.m. Initially, I had mentioned 1 p.m. or something like that, but there's a Russian program going on. So if anybody is available, please let me know. And that's it. Jagannath Gopal Prabhu, if there's anything else?
I think that's all. That's all right.
Yes, Prabhu. Okay. So Vanchakalpatarubhishya Krimba Sindhubhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Her Grace Vrinda Mataji ki
Jai.
jai.